Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Balance and Practices customer story, and this time we're going to have a look on the CoffeeNet or MondayCoffee company's, let's say, solution or implementation, how to build a complex solution in SharePoint Online, which is also taking advantage of the SharePoint PnP reusable components. My name is Vesa Juvonen, I'm a Senior Program Manager from SharePoint Engineering, and today's main presenter is Oliver. So Oliver, can you do the quick intros as well?
Yes, sure. My name is Oliver Zeiser. I'm a certified master for SharePoint, so I know Vesa for quite a long time now, and I work for MondayCoffee.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was, when we had the MCM training running, I was the instructor related on what was it, schema-specific customizations, yes, and development stuff, which was fun. Unfortunately, that program doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, so Oliver is going to be the main presenter. We're going to do a live demo as well on how MondayCoffee has built their really nice multi-tenant application, or how it's managing multiple tenants. But Oliver is leading the presentation. I'll interrupt whenever there's a nice question popping on my mind. But Oliver, take it away.
All right. Just a quick introduction who we are. The company I work for is called MondayCoffee. We are based in Switzerland, in Zurich, and also have an office in Munich, in Germany. Our main focus really is on collaboration. So we're not doing those fancy, awesome-looking intranet stuff. We are really focusing on how the people work with the tools, how they can collaborate together, and we try to simplify that way of working. So our solutions are based off Microsoft technologies, of course, and mainly on SharePoint Online and Office 365. And we really try to drive high consumption in Office 365. And therefore, we don't just implement the solution and program the solution, we also put a lot of effort in consulting and training. And that's probably a key part of all this. So we have developed two products. One is called CoffeeNet, and the other one is called EspressoNet, which is basically a small version of CoffeeNet, just much more simplified. So before I start, maybe a little background information on how we got to develop a product, because we are coming from the project business and haven't been on the market as an ISV. So it all started when we moved to SharePoint Online ourselves. As we all know, SharePoint out of the box is a little complex and not always very user-friendly. So we decided, okay, we need some sort of customizations. And we figured out pretty soon the key to customize SharePoint Online is to own the site provisioning process. So we decided, okay, we start developing a provider-hosted SharePoint app that fulfills our needs and does all the site provisioning. And after a little while, our customers saw that and said, hey, that's exactly what we want to have. And maybe with a few modifications, but the general idea is great. We want to have custom site provisioning ourselves. So we started from there and copied our solution, customized it, deployed it to Azure, and over the time we had, I believe, like 30 to 40 customers running our custom solution in Azure. Well, and then suddenly Microsoft changed something and we were in big trouble because we had to update like 40 solutions and publish them to Azure and talk to the customer about, hey, there might be an interruption, and this just didn't work out very well.
And to be fair, I need to say on that one, that happens. Yes, we do introduce changes in the UIs, we introduce changes in functionalities. So absolutely, good story on explaining on the right way of doing the stuff, no doubt.
Yeah, so we had to come up with a new solution somehow that is flexible enough to fulfill the customer-specific needs, but is also standardized at the same time, so we can react fast to the changes Microsoft makes in the future, to new features, to updates, whatever. Also, we found out over time site provisioning is the key to everything, but we didn't want to stop there. We also wanted to provide an option for the end users that simplifies the handling of their daily work with the sites without them being all SharePoint experts. Because once you provision a site, well, the user is left again with a whole complex situation of SharePoint. He has to go to site settings and activate features and manage permissions and know about content types and all that. So we really wanted to simplify that as well. So in the end, we built a multi-tenant application that provides template-based site provisioning and also features a custom app store for the end user, so he doesn't have to know all the details about SharePoint itself.
And on this one, actually, just to kind of clarify or elaborate on that one, so this custom app store, these apps are not actually SharePoint apps. So in your case, what you're doing is that you have a kind of an app, is an abstract concept for your service, which is actually a provisioning template or template, which is then applied to the site, right?
Exactly. I'll get into details about all this later on.
Excellent.
First of all, I would like to show the overall architecture. So the big difference here is it's a multi-tenant app. So we've all seen in PnP solutions the site provisioning process. We are using pretty much the same. We have our main web application, storage queue, and site creation job. But we also have a document DB, which we use for tenant separation. Also, we are using Azure Table for our logging solution, which is really, really important. If you are running for multiple customers, you really have to know what's going on, because you can actually have different tenants with different versions, and you have to find out about this if something goes wrong. Therefore, also we have some maintenance jobs. They are mainly for backup reasons, and in case we need to fix something. Those are actually built on the PnP web job architecture. So they are multi-threaded, and we can hit many customers at once. And we are making heavy use of CDN. So we're not using CDN just for our web application, but also for storage, where we store static content like images, branding files, stuff like that. And to manage all this, we need a separate admin portal that no customer can get in. And this is a secured controller, secured with Azure Active Directory. But in general, it's a typical architecture. So before I start demoing the solution, just to get a few terms right here, it's probably a typical structure. So usually you have a portal, which could be a project portal, department portal, workgroup portal. A portal is simply the place for the end users to search for a specific site or to create new sites. And then there are the workspaces where the end user actually lives in and does their daily collaboration and work.
Makes a lot of sense. Oliver, I do apologize. Can we go one step back on the previous slide, because I was muted. I tried to talk and that's all good. But quickly, kind of a few points on the overall architecture, and let's say the discussion on that one as well. If you go to in this one, so. You're using the Azure web jobs, so the maintenance jobs and site creation jobs are Azure web jobs. You're using the storage queue, and essentially this is the kind of a classic pattern, which has been shown in the PnP as well for long-running operations. So when somebody clicks a button, if it's a long-running operation, you put a task to the storage queue, which as well then fire the actual long-running operation as a web job. Technically, kind of from a technology perspective, you could theoretically use Azure Functions as well, but Azure Functions has a 5-minute timeout at least currently. So the Azure Web jobs are more flexible of doing that.
Yeah, also Azure Functions get pretty expensive if you're having long-running operations there.
Yes, indeed. For smaller things, they're super cheap, but then there might be a cost impact in long-running operations. But I think the overall design is really good, and overall architecture is really good. And this is something, to be honest, which we in the SharePoint engineering or in the PnP, we should have a reference story on how to build this kind of a multi-tenant application. Not saying competing against what you guys have, but also showing the power for other companies out there, how to build these kind of things, and then they're able to implement stuff. Because the current implementations and samples and references what we have in PnP, they're single tenant, so they would be deployed to a single tenant per customer.
Exactly.
And that's not scalable solution, like you said. If you need to then do modifications, then you need to update 30 different instances, and that's not fun, definitely not fun.
Yeah.
Cool, makes a lot of sense. Excellent and great design, no doubt. Cool,
All right.
Free to continue. Sorry for that.
No problem. All right, so I just explained the portals and the workspaces, and just going to show a few screenshots how this could look like, and I will demo that in a second. So this is basically SharePoint out of the box. We supplied a custom CSS, and that's pretty much it. It's a search site with a refiner, and it's just limited to find sites. And there's our site info web part on the upper right corner where you can create new sites and the admin can change some settings. Whereas a workspace, this is where the user lives in. And the key point I would like to point out here is, again, the site info web part down at the bottom. I have it a little bigger here. This is how our users control their site, so they don't have to go into all the deep settings that a SharePoint site provides. The settings button is actually really simple. It just gives the power to the end user to change the title, description, and change the state of the site, whether it's still active or not anymore, whether it's a public site or if he wants to have it a private site, stuff like that, and site logo and some tags. Also, he could delete the site or change sharing settings. So if he wants to share the site with the external users, he can do it here as well. And the other key part is our custom app store that I'm showing here right now. But it's probably better to demo this live real quick. So let me jump over to my VM. So again, here I'm on my portal site, which is our project portal in this case. As I mentioned, it's a fairly simple solution. You can search for a site. You can use the refiner. You could say, okay, just show me the private sites and only the ones that are tagged with SharePoint Online, for example. And that's pretty much it. Also, here's the place where you can create new sites. And now this is probably the key part, because now I'm not running in SharePoint Online anymore. This is actually our Azure web application. And in this case, you can assign multiple templates to a site. So a user can decide whether it's a customer project site, for example, or an internal project site. And depending on the template he picks, the form to create the new site might actually look different. So if I look at this one and go back and go to a different template. So this one features a custom disclaimer where the customer has to say, hey, yes, I agree to all the terms and conditions. I know all my data is going into the cloud, for example, stuff like that. So this is really the place where you can create sites and search for sites. Now let me flip over to a site, because I'm not going to create one. It would take a couple minutes. So this is a typical collaboration site, right? The user has his tasks and has a left navigation with project, document libraries, stuff like that, OneNotes. And also we have added some custom web parts, for example, our member web part or recent documents in the site, as well as a Yammer feed. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, this is actually the place where the user can control the site. Again, I'm going to show the settings dialog real quick. It takes a second to load, but here it is. And this is where the user can control the site. You can say, okay, my site is inactive or closed, and later on maybe apply a policy to this, and change just the general settings without getting lost in the SharePoint out-of-the-box site settings menu. Also, what I would like to point out, we have the option to provide translations here right out of the box. So you can always have your site multi-language capable. And to maybe show you this real quick, I'll switch over to a different browser in a second. Here I'm logged in as a different user, and the whole site is in German now. Everything is translated, beginning from the navigation, from the left navigation, the web part titles, the web parts itself, everything. And this is actually possible and is really, really important, especially in Switzerland, for example, where we have multiple languages within a small single country. And if I go back to the other browser again, here it's everything in English. And that's also a key component of our solution, that we try to make everything multi-language capable.
Makes a lot of sense, and it's great to see that it is absolutely doable in SharePoint Online, because as a European people, we both are in the Scholar European people, there's always multiple languages we need to deal with. Or if you have a global intranet, you want to make sure that you have a different languages for different people. Obviously, content isn't translated automatically, that's understandable because that's content, but this is the label-based translation, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So now I'm in the App Store. This is where the user can add functionality to his site. An app, as we mentioned earlier, could simply be just a out-of-the-box SharePoint app, like a calendar, but it could be more complex or custom solution, like a custom web part, maybe a list including a web part or something like that. So I'm just going to demonstrate this real quick. I'm going to add a calendar to my site, which is fairly simple. If it's loading, there we go. And all I have to do is provide a title. And right here I can actually enter a German translation for this as well. So I don't have to change the user interface and switch language of the browser and then adjust everything, which is a big pain. And here it's done pretty simple, and I can say, okay, I would like to add this app to the top of my navigation. And we can also customize the permissions right from this dialog. So maybe I would like to have visitors to not access this. Also, external users should not access this. And then I can simply add the app, which in the end just adds a calendar list to the site and adjusts permissions and does the translation, and also adds it to the navigation, and the navigation is getting translated there as well. Also, if I would go to installed apps now, here is my calendar, I can see it's installed. And we also have a recycle bin. If someone deletes an app, he has the option to restore it as well. So let me close this and refresh my site real quick. Here's my calendar. And if I switch over to my different user again and refresh this site as well, you can see it's already translated in the navigation. If I click on it, the list is translated, everything. So that's a pretty simple way for our end users to work with the SharePoint site and really focus on the things they need to do and not really have this deep knowledge within SharePoint. Also, what I'm Yeah, go ahead.
On the translations, correct me if I'm wrong, you can actually configure the used languages per customer as well as an admin operation. So in this case, we show German and English, but obviously you can adjust what languages will be available.
Exactly. I will demonstrate this a little later when we talk about our templating solution. Yeah. And it will get much more clear from there. Yeah, this is pretty much it. And this comes down to what most of customers want to have. They want to have a simple site provisioning solution and a place where they can get started to work, whether it's a project or a work group or a department or whatever. Some companies may say, hey, we have product sites or whatever. You're really flexible there.
What about actually on that particular topic, so on the customer requirements for the site provisioning, so you can customize the form of the site provisioning and obviously that's for adjusting based on customer business requirements. How flexible is that? Can we do an approval processes and all of that in the current solution,
yes,
just out of curiosity? Yeah.
Yes, you can actually. I can show this later on. When you assign a template to a portal, you have the option to say, hey, I don't want the end user to create the site right away, so the data doesn't get sent to the web job, but ends up in a SharePoint list before that. And starting from there, you can build your workflow, or could be a flow or whatever. And in the end, when the item gets approved, it then gets sent to the Azure Web Job, and then only the site creation will trigger.
Makes sense. Excellent.
So let's go back to the slides. So let's dive a little deeper into our app concept. We've talked about it a little bit already, and there are a lot of points on the slides, so I'll try to go through there as quickly as possible. But it's important to understand the concept behind it. So basically, an app, as we said earlier, is a simple piece of functionality within a site. You could probably best compare it to a full trust feature, if you're still used to that term. Features could have web parts, and they could have a list and during activation and all that. And that's pretty much comparable to our apps. But now when we get a little more technical, our apps are actually managed extensibility framework components. So managed extensibility framework is a .NET plugin concept. And this is probably an important point to point out here. You don't have to think in the old SharePoint terms anymore, and where you had to build up on the framework Microsoft was providing to you, so the ASP.NET solutions. You can use whatever technology you want, whatever you would like to use, because you're totally free with the app model. Managed Extensibility Framework also features dependency injections and stuff like that, and I'll get to it a little later why we've used and chosen this solution. But I'd like to stay with the apps for a minute again. So our apps are configurable. They have configuration and settings, and the big point is those settings can be globally, which means on a tenant level, or they can be configured on a template level, or even on instance level on the site. Every app is its own little MVC project. So whenever we create a new app, it's basically a little MVC solution that gets loaded into our main solution on the fly. And I'll talk much more about this in a little bit. So our app has to follow certain interfaces and implement the install, update, delete, and maybe restore methods. The app can bring its own MVC views and a even controller for logics and own dialogues. And as I just said, we're using dependency injection, so our app can actually import logic and functionality from our main solution. So one good example for this is logging. Logging is really important, and not every app has to bring its own logging mechanism. This would be a complete overkill. So we can just import this using Managed Extensibility Framework right into our apps. And also apps can show up on the create site form as well. That's what I just demonstrated using the disclaimer app, for example, and I can demonstrate this again in a little bit. They can show up on the create site form and in the App Store as well. So depending on what you actually put on your template later on, the create site form might look different, or even the site settings dialog. Yeah, apps can be system apps, so maybe a more technical app. Let's say it's a very simple app that just enables or disables a feature, let's say publishing feature or something like that. So I don't want that app to show up in the App Store for the end user. So we have basically a different type of app there. And the key point for this whole concept is we can have customer-specific apps. So we can assign an app to a tenant and provide the customer-specific logic there without building the same logic for all of our customers. Yeah, and like I said, an app can be assigned to a tenant and to an app store, and apps can be used in a template, of course. And I'll get into details about this a little later. So let's take a quick look at an example. So let's talk about our document library app. Everybody knows what a document library is. But you can imagine not every customer wants his document libraries look the same. They want to have different columns and maybe different content types and whatever. So this is where we are using PnP provisioning engine, but I'll get to this in a minute. I would just like to show a quick screenshot. So when the end user is in the App Store and would like to add a document library, he has a really simple solution again, just like I demonstrated it with a calendar app. But in the backend, the app is configurable. So you can actually have multiple instances of this app, and you can create a new instance and define a name for it and a translation again and a description. You can say whether this is an app that can only be used in the template or also is available for the end user in the App Store. And then what you see down at the bottom, you can actually provide a PnP file. Now, the PnP file is a PnP provisioning file, right? And within this file, we can define how the document library looks like. This is a fairly simple PnP provisioning config. In this case, all I'm adding is 2 additional site columns and adding those to the list later on and using those in the views as well. But you could basically add different content types to your site or add a site column or maybe just a column to the list itself. And what we do in the code, in the backend, then we are using the provisioning handlers to say, hey, okay, when you install a new document library, just provision lists, fields, and content types. So we are not using PnP provisioning to provision the full site, but to provision just a library and provision multiple instances of this library as well. And we are then, yeah.
Sorry, that makes a lot of sense. So because then this way you have more flexibility based on the user selecting the template. You'll just choose a set of templates which will be applied. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we then just override the title, as you can see on the bottom, and we are good to go. So the PnP provisioning engine is really flexible there. Yeah, all right. So what we can also do then with our apps is use them in templates, because we can just stack different apps onto a template and say, hey, when provisioning a new site, add this app and this app and this functionality, and we combine this with some additional settings, and we can then save this as a template. And this is where Azure Document DB comes in very handy, because we are basically serializing the whole solution into a JSON string. And it's very easy to store JSON in the Azure Document DB, which, by the way, is now called Cosmos DB. So in general, the idea of our templating solution is the template describes which apps get installed on the site by default, and also what the end users are allowed to add to their site. And I'll demonstrate this in a minute. Also, the template defines the permissions and groups and initial navigation structure and just general settings like the language for the site. And we can then copy those templates and export them and import them at a different tenant, for example, and all that. And we then, in the end, assign one or multiple templates to a portal, and the user is ready to go and create new sites based on this template.
Makes a lot of sense. Nice structure.
So, yeah, let's demo this real quick as well. So I'm in our backend of the app now. This is not what the end user sees, but maybe a power user or some sort of admin at the customer. And before I go into the templates, I'd just like to show the global settings for our apps real quick. So like I said, apps are configurable. So in this case, let's take a very simple example, our Yammer app. I can configure on tenant level already. Okay, whenever the user adds a Yammer app or a Yammer feed to a site, take this network and maybe a default group ID. The user can always override this, and you can always override all this in the template as well. But it just saves time for the user. Maybe another very simple approach is we can define a theme. So it's for branding. You can add CSS file and color file, font file, whatever you need. And you can configure this all globally for your tenant. So you don't have to enter those settings for every template you are creating. And also, because I showed that one earlier, I can configure the disclaimer app, which is just a rich text form, and also provide a translation for this again. So when building the template, I can reuse this text. Now let's go into the actual templating solution. I've got a lot of templates here because it's my demo environment. But I've prepared a little demo template. It's down at the bottom here, the PnP demo template. And I will just copy this one so I don't actually destroy the original one in case something goes wrong. And I can now start editing the template, and it's basically a simple wizard. So at the beginning, I can say, hey, is this a template for a portal or a start site or whatever? Or is it a simple workspace template? So templates have different types. Let's say this is our new template name, which is an internal name, and I'll get to the display name and everything later on. And in the next step, we can define all sorts of settings. I'm probably not going to go into every single detail of those settings, but just to give you a brief overview, you can define what the default homepage layout looks like, how many columns it has, whether it's the site will get created under the managed path sites or teams, what type of site it is. And this is where you get really flexible because you can enter everything. It could be a PnP site, it could be a product site, a project site, a department site, whatever. And you can also add a URL prefix and stuff like that. Then you can define the security settings. So you can decide whether the user who creates the site will actually stay a site collection administrator, or if you want to remove him from the site collection administrator and that way limit him in his permissions. You can define some default groups, site collection admins or owner, member, visitor, stuff like that. And also enable external sharing, or give the option to the end user to enable external sharing. And then whether it's allowed to enable external sharing and anonymous guest links and all that stuff. We have settings for access requests and whether members are allowed to share the site and all that. Of course, there are also regional settings. I don't have to go into this one, but that's just the regional settings for the site. And now here comes the key point that we have been talking about earlier. I can say, okay, my site has a default language, which is English, and I can just add additional languages. So in this case, I've added German, but I could add Finnish for Vesa as well. Since I don't speak Finnish, apparently I'm going to take this one away again. And later on, you can define some life cycle settings. For example, you could apply a policy. In this case, I have a read-only policy when the site is closed, stuff like that. Import search configuration XML maybe for the site if that's needed for some solutions you want to do there. And just some mixed settings where you can say, hey, no, I don't want to be a SharePoint designer to be used, or I don't want our end users to create workflows, or maybe disable the OneDrive sync, stuff like that. And once we have defined all those settings, in the next step, we are talking about the security. In this case, we're using SharePoint groups. Might look a little complicated, but basically I can define as many groups as I want to and assign a base permission to them. Now, the thing I'd like to point out here is our owner group actually only gets contribute permissions. So this way, the user can't actually do anything with a SharePoint site itself, but can only use it using our site settings and App Store. So we can really limit the user so he doesn't do anything harmful and destroys the site because he just doesn't have the knowledge. This really reduces IT support later on, right? And you can define groups for external users only, for example, so you can really identify later on in your site, okay, I don't want external users to see this library, and as I demonstrated it earlier in the App Store, you can just say, hey, okay, no access for external users. So it's fairly simple, and based on those groups, you can configure different things later on, and I'll get to this in a minute. So here I'm on the global settings screen again. You remember earlier what I showed, the example for the disclaimer app again. I can always override those settings on a template level again. And in this case, just to demonstrate this, I'm going to add something here. I'm going to add it for German as well. And I can save those changes. And go to the next step. Now the next step is probably the key part of the template engine, because this is where you add all those apps to the template. As I mentioned earlier, there are system apps and end user apps. So a system app is always marked with this gear icon. So those are apps the end user will never see in the App Store. But an admin can still add those. They are probably more technical apps, like in this case, we are adding our scripts to the sites and stuff like that. And you can add new apps as well. So in this case, I'm going to add the disclaimer app to the template because I just changed something there and to demonstrate it later on. And this is going to take a second.
But this is really super flexible way of kind of splitting the settings and splitting the configurations. And these are, like you mentioned, these are individual definitions, which could be PnP templates, or they might be code and all of that. So
exactly,
really cool.
It's totally up to the developer what he wants to do there.
Yeah.
So I have to provide a title. So let's call this PnP Terms and Conditions, and I'll add the German translation. And now maybe I have dependencies between those apps, and let's take an example. Maybe I say, okay, the disclaimer app needs to be installed before the Emma app because there is a dependency. So I can just simply take the app and drag it and move it before the Emma app. And whatever order I decide or I choose here is the order the app actually gets installed to the site later on. And also to demonstrate this, I can customize permissions. Let's take the document library, for example. And those permissions now, as you can see, those are the groups I added in the earlier step. So depending on what groups I add to my site, I can also configure the apps based on those. Apps can support some tokens like a site title. We all know if you sync OneNote to your local client and they all have the same name, it's a big pain. So we can, for example, prepend the site title to the app itself. Stuff like that. And we can say, let's take a web part app, for example. We can say, hey, I want this on the right or on the left zone, depending on the layout I choose earlier, actually. And let's say, okay, I want this on position 1, things like that.
Super flexible way of doing this. And this way, you're defining the outcome of the site already as a high-level definition, and whenever the end user actually creates the site, it is just ready there, and they don't need to do modifications, or it's ready there as an initial configuration, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you define the navigation structure for the site, the initial navigation structure. So it might look a little complex again, but it's really simple. This is basically a heading, and it has subnodes, and I could create an additional heading. I'll do this. And now I have the choice to say, okay, I want to provide a full URL, maybe to an external system, or a site relative URL, because I have no idea what the URL of the site will look like later on, because that's up to the user when he creates the site. Or I can choose an app, which I added to the template earlier in the step before this. So in this case, I could just say, okay, I want to link our related sites app. And I don't have to provide a title and translation anymore because that's already done in the step earlier. I can then go on from there and maybe add a display name. So just to demonstrate this real quick, and you'll see it later on where this shows up. Oh. That wasn't expected. Probably a timeout because I was too slow. But that's okay, because we are saving after every step, so all settings are still there. Go through there again real quick.
And now the key point here to understand, if somebody's watching this and didn't kind of follow, this is the admin view for defining the templates. This is not an end user experience on creating a site.
Yes, so exactly.
And the whole point is that you define this once or twice, or based on the number of templates, and then it's going to be it's going to simplify the end user creation of a site enormously. So
exactly. Yeah, and I'm here back now in the last step, and this is where I can assign apps to the App Store for the end user. So maybe I want my users only to create document libraries and that's it. And I can just simply say, okay, I don't want them to create asset libraries or blocks in this template. I'll take those out, and they won't show up in the App Store for the end user. So this is also a way to control what the end user can actually do on his site once it's created.
One story on this one, because we don't have time to go through all of the capabilities within the how you built the system, but correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about this one within the sync call before we did the recording. Because you're providing this as a multi-tenant app, as an ISV, so now the add-ins and apps, what the customer admin sees here, are based on the licenses and functionalities which they're actually buying for you. So yes, you have then an additional admin view where you can control, for this particular customer, these are the apps which are available to be selected. And that's a super clever way of having, let's say, a configuration and how do you and then capability of providing new functionalities available, and also slightly more simplified solutions for the customer. So depending on how much customer is paying, they get additional things available. Super clever.
Yes, I will demonstrate that actually in a minute. So just to finish the demo real quick, here's my template. And maybe I would like to assign this to the project portal. So I just copy the URL real quick and switch my management focus to this portal. And I can say, okay, I would like to manage this portal and add our new template to this site. So you can just say, okay, here's my PnP recording demo template, save changes. And if I go to the portal again and say create site.
So this is the end user. Yeah, this is the actual end user experience of the setup. Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly. And this is what the end user sees then. And as you can see, here is my customized app and with a custom disclaimer. So it's everything really flexible and configurable.
Absolutely.
Good. Let's go back to the slides real quick. So let's come to a few challenges. So the problem we have, of course, if we add a new app and develop a new functionality, how do we deploy all this without interrupting all our customers? Because, as mentioned earlier, it's a multi-tenant solution. So I can't just call 100 customers and say, hey, sorry, the solution will be down. We have maintenance time, something like that. That's just not very flexible. So what we are doing is our developer builds the app locally and tests it and everything. And once he's done, he can actually package it as a NuGet package locally, or he can check it into Visual Studio Online, TFS, and we have automated build tasks that then packages this app as a NuGet package. From there, we can upload or actually connect right to our Visual Studio Online server and pull down the app from there. Or the developer, if he is testing something in the staging environment, he can just upload it, the NuGet package manually. When installing the app, it actually gets copied also to Azure storage for backup reasons. So in case our web solution crashes somehow, or let's say a developer accidentally publishes his solution to the Azure website directly, something like that, then we always have the latest apps still available because they are, like I said, plugins. They are not part of our main solution. So we can restore our main solution and then pull down all the latest apps that had been installed to this solution. And just to complete this real quick, if we have changes on our main solution, we deploy it to a different slot in Azure and we do a swap. Very simple way of basically having zero downtime.
Yes, that's precisely, because that helps you on the fact that even though you do maintenance on your apps or a new version releases, you do not have to waste your weekend for not being able to serve the solution. Makes a lot of sense. Good solution. Good design.
So maybe I can demonstrate this real quick as well. So I'm going into our admin portal now. Now this is something only we as MondayCoffee see. It's actually secured via Azure AD, what I mentioned earlier. This is where we manage our tenants and everything. So this is not something where the customer can get into. Also, as you can see, where we have our logging and stuff like that. And now I'm demonstrating something. Let's say my colleague, a developer, has developed a new app. So let me switch to Visual Studio Online real quick and say, hey, okay, I know he has developed this news app. So here it is. And if I go back to our admin portal, I can actually connect directly from our system to our Visual Studio Online server, and I see those NuGet packages. And I can say, hey, okay, I would like to add this one to my tenant as well. So I can say, okay, let's add this app to the local repository. Local repository is basically just a folder in our web solution. So if I've added, just added this here, here's our NuGet package. It's always using the version as a subfolder because you could actually have multiple versions of the same app. And in there is the NuGet package. So directly download it from our Visual Studio Online server. And I can then go and show all my apps in the local repository. In this case, there's only one. I see, okay, it's not active yet, but it's the latest version. And I can say, okay, I would like to install this. And what is happening now, it looks a little strange, but it just shows all the things that got extracted from the NuGet package. So I can see there are DLLs, resource DLLs, there are MVC views, there are JavaScript files and icons and stuff like that. And also, just to show this real quick, let me switch here to our apps folder. Now all this stuff got extracted from the NuGet package, and I can see here is my news app. It has resource files and views and the contents with the JavaScripts and images and everything. Now the cool thing is all this got installed on the fly, right? My app is still running. I had no interruption. Visual Studio didn't crash. Everything's still working. And I can now go and say, okay, I would like to assign this app to my tenant. We have the option to assign an app to different tenants or just to a single tenant, which I'm going to do in this case, which is my tenant. Here are all our apps. And there should be the news app. Here it is. I can assign this to the tenant. And we're good to go. I can then use this app in my templates and whatever I want.
In a tenant level configuration, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That is a super cool thing, no doubt.
And this way we can deploy apps without interrupting any other customers and assign it to certain customers only and develop customer-specific apps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, if I go to my App Store, if it's loading.
Yeah, it's loading now from a local host, so.
Yeah, it's a little slow, and it's MVC. It's compiling the views.
Yeah.
Everything on the fly. But here's my news app right in the App Store now, because to be honest, I assigned it to a template earlier. It's just for demo purposes to save some time. And I can go and configure this app, right? So let's call this news. And I can say how many news I would like to display and whether I want to use Yammer comments and where to place the web part. So in this case, I'm going to place it up at the top of the site on the left side. Don't want to add it to navigation, don't want to customize the permissions, and I can add the app. Now, this app actually creates a content type and several site columns that get added to this content type. Then this content type gets added to a custom list that gets also created in the backend. And we are adding several JS link files to this list, as well as the content type. But
so it takes a while, yes. And that's probably
it's taking a little bit.
Yeah, the PnP provisioning engine should be handling this faster, but the problem is really the complexity of the logic of applying that kind of an app to the site. So.
And here we go, and here's our news list. And if I go in there, I can add a new news item. It's really just a simple list. But there's one more thing I would like to point out here. Can add, those are the columns that got added, and I'd like to say, okay, this news is valid for 2 days. Could provide an author. And now this is also a custom button that's using JS link. And once I click on it, I'm actually jumping back into the app. So this news app basically provides its own controller. And it's all installed on the fly. And I can then just drag and drop an image here. It's resizing the image on the client right away because I don't want to have that much traffic going on. So this was a fairly large image. And I'm resizing this on the client before I even upload it. And if I hit save, then the resized version of the image gets uploaded, and actually we are creating two different sizes, one preview and one larger one. And I can save this. And here's my news, really simple. And what I would also like to point out here as well, this picture actually got uploaded to Azure CDN. So the picture is directly being referenced from our CDN. So the end user doesn't have to take care about where do I put the image, and especially when it comes to performance reason, CDN is really the better way to handle this. You could actually use the SharePoint Online CDN as well, but in this case we're using our Azure CDN.
Yeah.
And also here the YAML comments and everything. So all this get deployed live without interrupting the system, anything like that, just worked.
That's super cool. Really, really great design, no doubt.
So let's go to the final slides. So maybe you're thinking, okay, if I install those apps all independently, how do you deal with the code you maybe like to share between your apps? Because if I install an app that is targeting a different shared library or something like that, I would actually have to update all apps at once, which is not what we would like to do. So in this case, a shared library doesn't work for us. So what we are using is a shared projects. And when you use a shared project, the code actually gets compiled right into the DLL of the corresponding app. So this makes our apps very independently from each other. And we don't have the problem when we update one app that maybe brings this super cool shared method with it. We have to update all apps at once. So this is just a fairly simple example what you can do within your apps. It's totally up to you what you're using. But again, the SharePoint app model is very flexible and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to use the tools and technologies you're used to from on-premise development. You can just use whatever you feel like it.
Absolutely.
So probably a big question, because this demo was all in Classic.
How do we deal with this?
SharePoint?
I was about to ask this. Yes.
Yeah, I figured you'd ask that one. So actually, we are building our web parts already using SharePoint Framework. The problem we have right now, you can't trust those apps or install those on the site collection using code, which is kind of funny because I think yesterday or the day before that you just announced that there's finally coming something new up there.
Yeah, we talked about it actually in build roughly as well, and it's been in our roadmap slides or roadmap page for a while. So there will be announcements on that one. Obviously, depending on when you're watching the video, it might be out or might not be out, but we're looking into having automatic ways of getting the web parts available when they're put into app catalog. So that's really the key point, and that's going to unlock you guys also to use SharePoint Framework for the within the sites. And the same applies also to SharePoint Framework extensions. So then you're able to add those widgets in the modern experiences just by adding them to the app catalog and then associating the client-side component ID, for example, in a user custom action. So
yeah, so that's why we are already building our apps, our web parts using SharePoint Framework.
Yes.
But currently, because we still need to use them in classic script editor web parts, we have a custom gulp task and custom webpack config, so we can bundle the same SharePoint Framework app so it still works on classic sites as well in a classic script editor web part.
Which is, by the way, a super, super cool thing as well, because now you have one truth of the code, but then you can compile that in multiple different ways. You can compile that to be used in a classic script editor web part or content editor web part, and then SPFX. Great, great, great solution. Because theoretically, that would then enable similar kind of experiences even in on-premises, if you would like to do that. That's always debatable, but anyway.
Yeah, so we are ready whenever Microsoft is ready. So that's the cool part about this.
No doubt, no doubt. Really cool.
So probably additional question, how do we deal with the modern UI? So there are definitely certain ways you can deal with it when you're still moving between this classic and modern world. But what we have done, for example, for a customer, we basically built a classic design that looks almost like modern, so it plays really well with modern pages. So you could actually use a modern document library, but still have the features of the classic side on your homepage, so you can add the apps using our app store and stuff like that. And in this case, we've just added our settings, user, and apps into the toolbar of the site. And when you click on apps, for example, it will open in a panel style way, not in a dialog, so it looks more modern, and it's using Office UI Fabric. And the site is also fully responsive. So this is just one simple example how you can deal with a situation we are all in right now, where you maybe, I need something from classic, but I want to use modern as well. So that's just a simple example.
Makes a lot of sense. So on the responsiveness, just out of curiosity, because I have to ask this, so are you using the PnP responsive package, or was it used as a starting point and then you modified that, or is it completely full custom solution for you guys?
Well, it is a custom solution, but we're using the same technology. So yes, we are not using a custom master page or anything like that. We are using a script injection, or, well...
script embedding, that's the right
Yes, I'm sorry about that one. Script embedding. I'm using the user custom action. And also custom CSS. And that's it. Yeah. So no custom master page and everything. So we've been looking at the solution. It didn't quite fit our needs, but we wanted to build it the same way, so it has the same grade of supportability.
Makes sense. Cool.
All right. So we are coming to the end of this demo. Probably the key takeaways and why I'm demonstrating this is always try to build your solution as flexible as possible. We all know the cloud is changing really fast, and at some point Microsoft pushes out updates and will break your solution in one way or another. This doesn't mean they actually break something, but maybe they remove a feature, or maybe just the tenant has an issue, there could be a bug or whatever, and you just have to be ready for it. I mean, it doesn't help to complain about all this. It's just build your solution in a way so you can deal with those changes or whatever it is.
And I have to say that that's one of the reasons I like to deal with Oliver, and especially related on feedback, because you can always give us straight feedback, which is good. But also constructive ways. So the point of being complaining, yes, there will be issues. Well, depending on a customization, how you build stuff in a SharePoint Online, if you used user custom actions in the past or JavaScript embedding, when the UI changes, your stuff can actually get broken. We should all know about that. That shouldn't be a kind of a surprise. And that's really the key point why we are building SharePoint framework. So we're getting to the direction where we don't break you when we push out UI changes, but it's a absolutely valid statement.
Yeah. Also, just stop thinking in this old SharePoint technology stack. It's totally up to you what technology you're using. Like I just demonstrated with the apps, where we are using this .NET plugin concept or whatever. We're using MVC instead of ASP.NET. Just make use of the tools that are out there, and get away from this old thinking, let's put it that way. And as the last point, really, really important, and yeah, people tend to not implement this right away, implement a very good logging solution, especially when you're running in a multi-tenant environment. It can happen that one tenant has an issue where another tenant doesn't have the same issue, and if you don't have a very good detailed logging there, you're getting lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. Any questions, Vesa?
Just out of curiosity, how many, if I may ask, how many customers you're currently kind of hosting in this platform? It is a super cool platform, but to understand kind of the scale as well. So, and how are customers kind of adapt? Are they're kind of super excited of seeing these opportunities and options?
Yes, definitely. So I can't say the exact number, but it's over 100 customers right now running on this platform, and that's why we're also using all those Azure technologies and then the backend to be able to scale whenever needed. That's also one reason why we chose Azure Document DB, because it's really easy to scale that and stuff like that. And customers are really, really happy with the solution, not because of the technical details or anything like that, but mainly we can get started with a project right away. We install the solution, import a couple templates, and that's it. We can start creating sites, and the customers can start working with the system, and getting hands-on experience is just so important. And if you just provide them with a blank SharePoint team site, they are already getting lost. So this is a really, really good way for us to get started, really, really fast. And that's when our consulting and training and everything kicks in, because there's this saying, a fool with a new tool is still a fool, right? So you can implement the best solution ever, but in the end, it's still you have to make sure the users are using the tool right, they are working in a way the solution is meant to be, and that's where it's still, even we reduce complexity and permissions and all that stuff, it's still really, really important to train the user.
True, and not obviously not just only, to be honest, not just only within your solution, but also in SharePoint Online, because quite often people don't understand the change management in the SharePoint Online as well, because it's not just, well, technically the end users will learn at some point if you just throw them in SharePoint Online, but it would be worthwhile to think through the same change management process. Who do we train? How do we train? How do we communicate internally, and all of that as well? So it's a big part of the actual landing the SharePoint Online successfully within the customers as well. So not just buying licenses and say, have fun. So
yes.
Cool. Thank you, Oliver, on this one. A relatively long session, no doubt. We do understand that, but there's a lot of interesting technical details and technical ways and patterns how you guys been solving, let's say, classic challenges. And the solution itself is absolutely, how would I put it, beautiful. I personally, I really like the way you can adjust how it's being split to multiple sections and multiple configurations. And then in the end, from an end user perspective, it's super simple. And that's really nice way of extending SharePoint. Obviously, this is a relatively hardcore ISV solution. Well, not super hardcore, but hardcore still. You can do smaller customizations in SharePoint as well, but it's a great example of a ISV solution. So really, really nice implementation.
Thanks, Vesa.
Cool. Maybe one more question, because the guys are using the PnP provisioning engine. I kind of mentioned that at some point that it's widely used. So what's your kind of a feedback and take, and let's say from a maturity perspective, from a capability perspective, and all of that in the provisioning engine? Have you guys running the random issues and all of a sudden something is breaking up, or what's the kind of your take on the engine?
Well, the engine works pretty good if you use it the way it's meant
intended,
to be.
Yes.
Yeah, but as soon as you need a little more or something a little different, it can get very complex. I mean, you can add your custom logic to it as well, but there will always be some parts that are not fully supported yet. And the second part is you put your hands into some other dependencies. So we are dependent on what you guys are doing in the future. And that's something we didn't really want to do. But still, the provisioning engine is really cool and flexible. And that's why we are using it in some parts and to some degree, but not for the whole solution.
Yeah.
Also, there are some, well, let's say missing points or things that are not fully worked out yet, and that's when it comes to the multi-language story. There have been a lot of discussions about this, I know that, but there are simple examples like views are not getting translated using the provisioning engine, and if our customers need that, we have to build our way around this, and that's one reason why we chose not to use PnP provisioning engine all the way through, but also you have to be very technical to create those templates. You have to understand the XML structure and all that, and you have to know what you can do and what issues can happen if you do something wrong and stuff like that. This is why we chose to use it only on certain parts, but we wanted to provide a better editing experience for the guys who create the templates.
Yep, absolutely makes sense, and it always depends on the business requirements how to use the existing tooling and how to use the capabilities. But absolutely good feedback. But from your perspective, it's just kind of repeating what you were saying. The reason why you're not using the engine more is that there are certain gaps, so it should be even more, let's say, enhanced or bigger from a capability perspective.
Yes.
For your scenarios, so no doubt, yeah.
Yeah. Plus the dependency part, we don't want to be dependent on new releases from you guys.
Yes.
If you are slow and we want to be fast, it sounds stupid, but then we need our own solution somehow.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
For the parts that are already well done a long time ago, that are valid and that just work, like we're using the provisioning for the document libraries and other lists, that's completely valid approach to use it there. And you can always override certain properties, like I just showed with the document library example, where we override the URL or the title just on the fly. So yes. It's really flexible solution, and that's the really good part about it.
Cool. Thank you, Oliver, on that one. But anyway, I think it's time to wrap up. So thank you, Oliver, for a great demos, great presentation, and great way of showing how the SharePoint Online can be flexible as well. And on the opportunities for ISVs. I think there's a lot of partners and all around the world who are now being kind of thinking through their model. What does it mean that we used to do a farm solution in on-premises, now when I'm heading to SharePoint Online, how should I do this in the future? And this was a great presentation on showing how you guys solved that transition. So thank you for that. But thank you. And if there's any questions around this presentation, we'll add links to the Microsoft Tech community and everything else, and we'll loop in people to the discussion. But thank you for watching. Thank you, Oliver, for presentation, and let's stay in touch.
Thanks.